Hello, I'm Pastor Heath, and I have been asked by several people about my bread recipe. And it's really quite a simple recipe. And so I decided I will do it right here, and I'll show you, and you'll be able to see it as it is made. First, 3 cups warm water. You're maybe asking, what is warm water? Well, it has to make the yeast come to life. And so, when you put your finger in it, it should be warmer than your body temperature, and definitely not so much that it would burn you. 100 to 120 degrees is fine, so more than your normal body temperature. And you want it a little warmer than that. And so there we go. And you don't really have to be too exact. This is a very, very forgiving recipe. 3 cups warm water, and then yeast. Buy a big bag of yeast. You can store it in the fridge. It'll last a while in there. And 1 tablespoon of yeast. Pour that in. I normally don't do it all at once, but instead spread it across the top so that it does not clump together. And then I let this sit for a couple minutes. The recipe itself actually just has you throw this all in at once. But I like to have the yeast come to life a little bit. Mix it up a little bit. And then you don't have to do this. This is not part of the normal recipe, but I always think it adds a little flavor, makes it a little moist, to do a little maple syrup. And so I'm not measuring this because it's not in the normal recipe. We're not pouring a ton in, just a little bit. There we go. Just enough to add a little flavor to it. Also not part of the recipe, but I think it makes it have a better texture, is a little bit of olive oil. Once again, just a little drizzle. Not a lot, it's not in the recipe, so we don't want to have to worry about that. And so we've added that to the recipe. And you don't have to. All you really need to have is flour, yeast, water, and then a little bit of salt. So now what we have in here is the yeast, we have the water, as I said, a little bit of maple syrup went in, that's not in the recipe, a little bit of olive oil, it's not in the recipe, mixing it all up. Now it's time for the flour. Got a big old bag of flour here that came from Costco. In case you need it, it's all-purpose flour. You can get bread flour if you want, but all-purpose flour works just fine. And so now it calls for 6.5 cups of flour. What I normally do is I take it, lift it up. Once I have it full on the bag, I just take this knife and I'm gonna level it off with the knife back into the bag. That is cup number 1. Once again, I don't plop it in one spot. I try to spread it out a little bit. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. And then the half, I'm just going to fill it about half of this. It does not have to be exact. Looking to see about half in there. A little more than half, so I'm going to put a little back in there. There we go. And a half. And then the salt. The salt's really important to help the process. It calls for 1 to 1.5 tablespoons. I always just do 1. And I always do it on top after everything else has been added together. And basically the way that I like to do, there we go, 1 tablespoon. And I don't clump it once again. I spread it across the top of the flour. And then for me, what I like to do is I like to mix up the flour and the salt before I start to mix it up with the rest of the stuff. There we go. And now I'm just going to mix this all together. Traditional bread recipe has you do a lot more work in this. You've got to do a lot of kneading it and throwing it on the counter and putting flour down and kneading it. The magic of this recipe is that all I have to do is stir this up. And with a wooden spoon. You do not want to use anything metallic. Using a metal vessel or a metal stirring actually does have some reaction. It can affect the flavor, the final product. Plastic is fine, wood is fine. And so here I'm using a plastic bowl. And really you want something that you have a lid on. You can of course use saran wrap at the end to put over the top, but I like to have something that has a lid that you can vent it with. And so now we're stirring it up. And making sure everything, there's no dry spots. That's what we're really trying. There can still be a little bit of clumps in here, but we want to make sure that there are no dry spots. This is also a good time where you can see maybe if you added too much flour because you really don't have enough moisture in here, you can kind of tell. And so you see this is all starting to come together. This is really easy, really quick making bread. Now, the process of where we have to leave it and how long we have to leave it around is longer than a normal bread recipe. But the amount of work and time that you have to invest is a lot less. So there we go. You notice it's not runny, it's not slushing to side. It's still a little wet and tacky all the way through. And so now, what we are going to do is we are going to leave it here on the counter like this, and we're going to take a lid, and we're not sealing it, just kind of putting it loosely over the top. You could go like this, I put it like that, but I haven't pushed it down. This is going to rise up, it may even hit the bottom of this. Sometimes what I do is I take a little pan spray and spray across the top of it, just in case it rises up and hits the lid, doesn't get stuck on there, you don't have to worry about it, you don't lose it, it'll come right back off and you put it into the container for later. So this is going to rest like this for 2 hours. 2 hours. Okay friends, I'm back. It's been the 2 hours we were supposed to wait. Let's see what awaits us inside here. Remember, I sprayed the top because it was going to rise up and maybe get the top of the lid and it would stick a little. Oh, we got a little there. Oh, a little bit had touched the top, but thanks to spraying that, it did not stick to that. You can see it's now filling the pan. You see lots of those air bubbles. That's a good thing. It's rose up. And then after the 2 hours, we're actually gonna put the lid back on. This time a little more firm, but we do not want to seal it once again. And we're going to put it in the fridge. And we're going to leave it in there for 3 days. Now, you can take this right now after waiting the 2 hours and you could put it into pans and you could bake it. And it comes out fine. But waiting the 3 days, enzymes start to work in there and it creates a better flavor, better texture, and it's easier for your body to process. It breaks down some of the gluten and some of the stuff that is in there. And so people that have gluten intolerance, that does not mean that they're allergic, but sometimes gluten upsets them. Waiting those couple of extra days actually means that they are less likely to be affected by this. And so we're gonna lid it and we're gonna put it in the fridge for 3 to 4 days. We're back. We took our bread dough that we made, we put it in the fridge for 3 to 4 days, and now it's time to use it. See what it looks like? It looks a little bit different than original. It has this color to it. It's a little different. It's a little firmer. You can leave it out if you want to work with it extra. but I don't recommend that too much. It's easier to work with when it's cold. That's one of the reasons why you don't necessarily want to use this dough immediately after it's made. It also makes 4 1-pound loaves of bread. And you don't have to use it all at once. Today we're not going to use all of this. I'm going to show you how to do 2 different types of loaves, and then the rest can be saved for later. That means that you can make 1 loaf and then go 2 or 3 days, make another for up to 14 days, so that this portion that you made, you only had to make it once, and now you'll have fresh bread for 14 days. That's why I like this recipe. Remember, we talked about the fact that you didn't have to knead it, we just stirred it up, and now I'm going to show you what you do to cook it up. I'm going to put some pan cooking spray just to make sure nothing sticks. I have an oval pan and a rectangle pan. One's a little bit bigger than the other. And I'll show you how we do this. You just reach in. We don't want to push it down or squish it down. We don't want to lose any of these air bubbles that we have in here. And you want to get about a grapefruit size, okay? And then I just have flour in this pan, and we're going to coat it just a little bit in flour. Makes it less sticky, which is why I have the gloves on, because it can be a little bit sticky. And now you're going to just fold it under. See what it looks like underneath there? You don't worry about that, because when you bake it, that's all going to be gone. You just want this nice round top. I put it in the flour to get a cloak on it like that. It helps it rise up. It's called a gluten cloak officially. And it helps it to rise and to stay good. And I just plop it right in that pan. And we're gonna leave it to rise for 30 to 90 minutes. The longer you let it, the higher it gets, and it gets a little bit of a lighter, airier texture when you go towards that 90 minutes, but you don't want to go too long. Normally I do about an hour. It will depend on how warm it is where you have it doing this. The warmer it is, the sooner. So if it's a really warm place that you have it, you could do it in 30 minutes and have more than enough. So now this other pan's a little bit smaller, so I'm going to do a little less of a grapefruit size. Same thing, put it in to the flour. There we go, just slightly coated. I'm going to do the same thing of putting it under like I did last time. See that? Except for this time I got it more in a oval rectangle shape. Put a little extra flour on top, take the flour off, plop it in there. Push it down, make sure it fits, and there we go. We'll be back after we let it sit for about an hour. Okay, friends, we have waited our hour, and it has risen up. You can see it filled it out a little bit more in both of these. And we do want to take a sharp knife and just create some strips down here. It's going to allow it to not rise up in a weird pattern. This lets some of the air out, so it's going to spread nicely. And so all I have to do is take a very sharp knife and just cut a couple of slits across it, not too deep. Some people like to do patterns and make it look all nice. I just do a couple of slits across the top. And there we go. As I said, just a reminder, we only did 2 loaves. There's 2 more that are in there. When we make a batch there, you get 4 1-pound loaves. And you can use them any point up to 14 days out. We didn't put eggs in it, we didn't put milk in it, it will stay good. The farther you get along, it gets a little bit more sourdough flavor to it if you like that. You can wait longer to the 10 to 14 days. As I said, each time you make it, it'll have a little bit different flavor. So day 4 when you cook one, and then you need more on day 7, and you take another one out, it'll have a little more sourdough flavor, and then on day 10, and then on day 13. Of course, you can cook them all at once. I often do, and you can easily cut what I gave for the measurements in half. You can also double it. This recipe does work well for that. I know some recipes don't. This one you can figure out, do the math and figure out how to make a bigger or a smaller batch. I often have never done, I don't do the less than, but I do double it, and I have sometimes tripled it. And you just keep it in the fridge for that time. So now we're going to put this in the oven. We're going to put it in the oven for 20 to 30 minutes. And between 400 and 450 degrees. They normally say 450 in the recipe. I like 400. And they normally say 30 minutes, but sometimes it goes quicker, sometimes it goes longer. It depends on how much did you put in the pan, how big is the pan, how much is in there. So I cannot give you exact measurements because remember, each time we grab a piece of the dough and we put it in here, they may not be the same sizes. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at the color, and then we're going to actually listen to the sound it makes when we come out. It should have a hollow sound. It should be nice and hard on top and hollow. So I'm going to put it in the oven, and we'll be back in a little bit. We have baked our bread in the oven 20 to 30 minutes, 400 to 450 degrees. Remembering that depending on if you have more or less in the pan, it will affect that. Lots of things affect that. I like 400. I don't like it to go as quickly. I like to rise a little bit more. Some people like the 450. You just have to go. Now, what I was saying is the key is when it's done, it should be pulling away from the sides, which you see here. It actually comes right out. Same with this one. And then you should be able to hear it. It's nice and hard, and it sounds kind of hollow. If it's not fully cooked, there'll still be some wetness in the middle, and it won't sound hollow. You won't hear that sound that you get if it's fully baked. Don't really know how to explain it. You kind of have to try it, trial and error. But you know it has to be brown on top like this, and it should be hard and nice and crispy and then you let it cool. Some people like to have it relatively soon, but if you cut it too quickly, the knife won't go through and it's just going to shred. It still tastes good, but you do need to let it cool a little bit so that the knife can go through it and enjoy it. So that is a very simple bread recipe with just a couple of ingredients that allows you to make a good amount that you can use over a 14-day period, so you don't have to make it every day. Life is busy, and so this is a recipe that allows you to have 4 different loaves to be baked over 14 days. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you can use this recipe for your family. And I urge you, since it makes 4 loaves, that maybe you make them all in one day and keep 1 or 2 for yourself and give 2 or 3 away. Glad you joined me. Good luck in your baking.